The Bleeding Ground Volume 9. The Last Free Town, Part 1. A Blackscreen audio production, written and narrated by Mason Adey. Evander, Clearwater, the 17th of October. The night is frigid and moonless as I wander pensively through the Clearwater Peace Garden, and the bitter cold chills me to the bone. Thick banks of near impenetrable fog swirl around the town square. The streets are silent and deserted. There's something oppressive and eerie about the stillness of it, but perhaps that's just my foul mood talking. It's been a week since Emine and I had our meeting with Bossman. Since then, the alliance of the three towns has dominated my thoughts. The clock is ticking, and I think we both feel the pressure to hurry up and make a final decision. But that's easier said than done, because there's so many angles to consider. I'll admit that I found Bossman charming enough, but I wasn't keen on his approach. His strategy was nowhere near as carefully crafted and opaque as he seemed to think it was. The pressure tactics and not so subtle intimidation were vaguely annoying, mostly because they were entirely unnecessary. If he wanted our help, all he had to do was ask. There was no need to manipulate us, and I wish he knew that. Emine tried her best to put that into perspective for me. She said, "That's just how it is with Arcadian politics. It's a dirty game that relies on strategy and leverage. Bossman and his friends are conspiring against a government official. The Crown aren't exactly lenient when it comes to treason, and his meeting with us left them exposed. Therefore, he had no choice but to play his cards close to his chest to ensure that we couldn't stab him in the back. I get that, but I still don't like it. Something that makes me uncomfortable is not knowing exactly what Bossman's proposition entails. He said that Clearwater wants Malford gone, and once he's dealt with, he'll be replaced by somebody more sympathetic to their cause. The question is, what does Bossman have in mind? What in the green earth of the gods could Emine and I do to get a captain of the Queen's Guard removed from office? It doesn't really matter. Like it or not, Bossman holds our fate in his hands, and there's no way of knowing what he might do if we refuse to get involved. Emine and I are in agreement. Either we're in, or we have to hit the road and disappear for good. I hate that he's put us in that position. We've both grown fond of Minton, and neither of us wants to leave it behind, mostly because it feels like there's nowhere else to go. The kingdom only has so many towns, and we can't run forever. After a couple of days of weighing up our options, it seemed that the best course of action was to do some digging, to arm ourselves with as much information as possible. Emine was worried, because she thought it might take longer than we have, but thankfully I've made a few friends during our time in Minton. I remembered that when I was working on the barn at Brathwell Farm, Lizzie mentioned she has a sister who lives in Clearwater. Luckily, Lizzie could talk the roots off a tree. All we had to do was pop over to the farm and subtly steer the conversation in the right direction. It just so happened that Lizzie was riding out to visit her sister the very next day, and she offered to let us tag along. She insisted that she was eager for the company, and that her sister, Heather, would be more than happy to put us up for a night or two. We needed to know more about Clearwater, and Lizzie was unknowingly offering us a convenient solution. I felt bad, using her like that, but the opportunity seemed too good to refuse. The plan was to pay the town a visit, get a feel for the place, and make a final decision one way or the other. The journey from Minton to Clearwater took 35 hours. Lizzie was animated and chatty, the weather wasn't all that bad, and to be honest, I quite enjoyed myself. Unfortunately, when we arrived in town last night, Lizzie was met with tragic news. Yesterday afternoon, the body of Lizzie's niece, Helen, was discovered on the banks of the River Furos. The poor girl was strangled to death and discarded as if she was nothing. My heart breaks for the family. To lose a child is a terrible fate, but for them to be the victim of such a callous murder is unthinkable. Helen's family are convinced she was killed by Captain Nathaniel Melford, a name that I'm becoming far too familiar with for my liking. The Grimsleys own the Bull's Head pub. According to Heather, the place was vandalised a few weeks back, and the damage was so extensive that the family wasn't sure whether they'd ever reopen for business, even before Helen was murdered. Apparently, Helen barred more than a dozen officers of the Queen's Guard after one too many drunken brawls. Threats were made, and when the Bull's Head was smashed up less than a week later, Helen was adamant that the QGs were to blame. The family had been running that pub for more than a century. It was their livelihood, their pride and joy. By all accounts, Helen was livid, and despite the warnings of her family, she was unwilling to allow its destruction to go unpunished. She started pointing fingers and making public accusations, but there was no evidence, so there was nothing that could be done. It was Helen's word against theirs. Eventually she tried taking it up with Captain Melford himself, which turned out to be pointless. Apparently, he just laughed in her face and dismissed her as a foolish woman with paranoid delusions. After that, he actively ignored her, and the QGs wouldn't let her anywhere near him. The Luckbringer is a casino boat that travels up and down the River Furos. The day before last, Captain Melford was on board, enjoying a game of cards. Helen forced her way in, confronted him, and caused a scene. The captain was humiliated and furious. "You'll rue the day you crossed me, you silly, nosy little bitch." Those were the captain's words, according to Heather. Maybe that's just hearsay, and he said nothing of the sort. Maybe it was just an idle threat made in the heat of the moment, but 24 hours later Helen Grimsley was found dead, and that doesn't feel like a coincidence. The look of devastation on Lizzie's face when she heard the news haunts me. I just can't seem to shake it as I trudge along, leather-gloved hands shoved deep inside the pockets of my coat, gravel crunching beneath my feet. It felt wrong to wait for Emine at Grimsley Farm. I didn't want to impose upon their suffering, so I've been traipsing mindlessly around town all afternoon. I'm not quite sure what makes me look up as I pass him. A man, sitting quietly by himself with his head bowed and hands clasped. Something about him seems familiar, so I stop and turn to face him again. It takes a few seconds for the penny to drop, but when it does, I'm stunned. Gone is the green guardsman's coat he was wearing back in Lockbury. A battered leather jacket, workman's jeans, and a sturdy pair of boots have taken its place. Between the mid-October gloom and his casual, off-duty clothes, he's barely recognisable, but it's definitely him. Emine's friend, James. Sometimes, I seriously wonder how much control I have over my own life. Do my decisions matter, or is my destiny set in stone? Am I simply living through the events of a story that was written from the day I was born? Do the gods guide my life, or govern it? I waver for a second, trying to decide one way or the other. Approach him, or walk away. There's only one thing that I know for certain. It has to be now or never. I have to decide how much I trust him. Does it really matter that he's an officer of the Queen's Guard? He stuck his neck out for us in Lockbury, and I certainly owe him my life for that. Emine counts him as the only family she has left. If we can't trust him, then I don't know if we can trust anyone. I don't believe that he would intentionally divulge information about us, at least for Emine's sake. But what if he had no choice? If they're okay with public execution, then who knows what lengths the Crown might go to force a confession and get their hands on the information they want. It might be safer for everybody to just walk away now and keep him in the dark, but it doesn't feel like the right thing to do. He's Bossman's cousin. He works for Captain Malford. Surely he could provide a strategic advantage. It seems like an opportunity too good to pass up. I've been searching for a sign, for some small indication of what we should do. This has to be it. I can feel it in my bones. To see James, here and now, feels too significant to be ignored. Following my gut, which is all I really have right now, I stride over to take a seat beside him on the smooth stone bench. He shuffles over to make space with a polite nod, but he doesn't really look at me. I sit silently for a moment, considering my words. The centrepiece of the garden lies directly ahead of us. A tranquil pond, framed by a twin set of stone arches. They house ornate, stained glass panels, backlit by cleverly concealed gas lamps. One depicts a majestic phoenix, hued in fiery shades of amber and scarlet. It soars over an idyllic landscape of blue and green, through a sky of burnt orange, as the rising sun peaks over the horizon. The second arch features an elegant dragon, with scales of rich purple, rosy pink and warm gold. A plume of silver smoke trails behind it as it glides through the night sky, hued in navy blue, and the flickering flames of the gas lamps offer the faintest impression of starlight. Sparkling beams of translucent light cut through the fog, dancing across the pond's glassy surface. The effect is mesmerising, and I just sit there for a moment, basking in the otherworldly ambience of the garden. I glance back at James. He seems a lot more approachable than the first time we met, which makes sense considering the differing circumstances. There's a warm glow to his rich, ebony skin. The tight curls of his chestnut hair are closely cropped and styled with care. His coarse, black beard is peppered with grey. He wears it short, but thick and neatly trimmed. The way it frames his jaw suits him. With his athletic, broad-shouldered physique, I'm sure he'd make a formidable opponent, but my perception of him is clouded by Emine's tales of his kindness. All I can see is one of the only people to ever make Emine feel like life was worth living. Hello, James. Long time no see. I think we need to talk. I keep my voice low as I turn to face him. Listen, I know you won't be happy to see me. I get that, but please just give me a few minutes of your time and hear me out. There are things I think you should know, and I'd value your opinion. He tenses, his nostrils flaring angrily as he takes a deep breath. Opening his eyes, he takes one look at me and grumbles as he runs a frustrated palm across his face. You've got to be fucking kidding me, he growls, shaking his head with a scowl of disapproval. I could have swung for helping you out of that shit show in Lockbury. You should be far away from here, Prince of the South. He doesn't shout, but his fury is palpable as he fixes me with the same stone-cold glare he gave me before forcing me out of that window in Lockbury. His fists are clenched, as if he'd love nothing more than to punch my lights out right now. You're right, he says. I'm not happy to see you. If the two of you had any sense, you'd have disappeared a long time ago. We were trying to keep our heads down. I spread my palms as he gives me a derisive snort. I know it sounds like bullshit, but honestly, we were. Alright, I believe you, he grunts, shrugging impatiently. It clearly didn't work, though, so what happened? We were lying low and working our way south. Obviously, the plan was to get as far away from Lockbury as possible and avoid towns with outposts. That's how we ended up in Minton. James flashes me a knowing look, filled with wary curiosity. Shrugging again, He heaves a frustrated sigh. Great. Why do I have the feeling this is going to piss me off? He asks with a wry smile, but there's no humour in his narrowed eyes. You've got 5 minutes. Talk. Keeping the details as concise as possible, I give him a full account of everything Bossman said during our unexpected meeting. James listens with a deepening frown. He shifts uncomfortably, shoulders tensed, his knuckles white as he grips the bench. The more I talk, the more agitated he becomes. For this thing with the 3 towns to work, Melford has to go, I say, echoing Bossman's words. As far as I can tell, the plan is relatively simple. Emine and I would be scapegoats, a smokescreen for the Alliance to hide behind. I can see the logic in it, even if I don't like it. Recruiting a couple of outlaws to do his dirty work for him allows Bossman and his friends to keep their hands clean. The Crown aren't going to give Emine and I a fair trial if something goes wrong and we get caught. Even if we tried to throw the Alliance to the wolves, who's going to believe us? There's a long silence once I'm finished. James stares, his piercing green eyes studying me intently, as if searching for any hint of deception. A muscle twitches in his temple, betraying the internal battle he seems to be fighting. It seems as if he's about to snap, but then, with a weary shake of his head, he lets out a low, rumbling chuckle. It builds, rising in volume and intensity until James is shaking with laughter. It's a grim laugh that sounds as if he's torn between exasperated bemusement and restrained fury. His hand slams into the cool limestone bench, the sharp crack of his palm swallowed and smothered by the blanket of fog that drifts sluggishly around us. He takes a sharp breath in through his nose, briefly closes his eyes, and exhales slowly, as if trying to regain his composure. "Where did you even come from?" he asks incredulously. "I was shitting myself that day in Lockbury, convinced Emine were done for, that she was heading for the gallows and there were nowt I could do about it. Then you just pop up out of nowhere. I'm not going to lie, I couldn't believe it when you escaped. I was on edge for weeks, waiting to hear that you'd been killed or captured. I spent the last few months keeping my ear to the ground, but I ain't heard anything about you, so I figured you'd gone back to where you came from. But clearly not. I don't get it. If it were me, I'd have disappeared. I'd have been a ghost. I'd have ran as far away from the Northern Kingdom as I could possibly get as fast as I could get there. If only it were that easy. I sigh, offering him a fleeting smile. Until a few months ago, I'd never even heard of the Northern Kingdom. My home was many, many miles into the south. "The lying bastards," says James, with just a hint of a satisfied smile. "I always knew they were full of shit. There was no chance the entire south was unsettled. I figured there had to be something out there." To be honest, it was nothing like Arcadia. It was like another world. I grew up in a little hamlet, tucked away in an isolated valley. Rough terrain, vicious winters. Contact with outside clans was few and far between. You could walk for days without seeing anyone. It wasn't unsettled, but it was quiet and peaceful. Even if the Crown knows the truth, I'm sure they'd still consider us barbarians anyway. "I assume you're not actually a prince, then?" he asks, looking genuinely curious. "Nah, not even close." I shake my head. That was just me, trying to buy us some time and letting my mouth run wild. "I bet she loved that," says James, looking ever so slightly amused. "On one hand, you lied to a government official, punched him in the face, and made him look an absolute twat in a public forum. That's a win in Emine's book. On the other hand, I made myself a monarch." I sigh theatrically and laugh as James offers me a knowing, sympathetic grimace. Of course. She's had years to wind him up. Poor bastard. "I guarantee you'll never hear the end of that one," he says, shaking his head with a begrudging fondness. Honestly, I love her like family, but that girl is a pain in the arse. She can hold a grudge, even if she's joking, and she's too smart for her own good. On top of that, she's as stubborn as a rusty gate. When you do or say something that makes you look like an idiot, you think she'll forget about it, or at least you hope she will, but she never ever does. She still takes the piss out of me for that time I said hello to a dog and it bit me, which was like 10 years ago now. These days, I don't even bother getting into arguments with her because she's always got an answer, and the worst part is, most of the time she's bloody right. I'll be sure to tell her you said that, I say, smirking as he shakes his head at me. Yeah, alright then, mate. You do that. I'll get my own back eventually, and that's a solemn promise, that is. A runabout coach comes barrelling through the town square, heading north along Big Street, and startling us both in the process. James catches my eye, and we share a quiet laugh as the clattering of hooves fades into the night. Then, a tense silence settles over us once more. James sits with his arms folded, drumming his fingers against his biceps, brow furrowed, lips pursed. I'm dying to break the silence, but my gut is screaming at me to keep my mouth shut for now. This is important, and there's no need to rush. The best course of action is to just be patient and give him some time to collect his thoughts. Eventually, he rubs the back of his neck and shakes his head, as if to clear his mind of clutter. Ah, fuck it, he growls, more to himself than me. Alright, I'll level with you. I've known about this business with the South East Coalition for a while now. I believe in what they're working for. I'll be having words with David for dragging you into this, but I can't say I'm surprised. He's always been a resourceful bastard ever since we were kids. My mum says he's a lethal cocktail of charisma, ambition and pride. He gets it from our nan, apparently. I hate that he made it so complicated. I shake my head, frowning. I get that there's a lot at stake here. I understand that it's potentially lethal business and he has to be careful. But I'm not a mindless pawn and I don't like being played. He should have just dropped the act and asked for our help. If he's genuinely working towards a better future, then I respect that. I'd be happy to help, but the way he handled it doesn't exactly give me faith that he won't throw us to the wolves the first chance he gets if it means furthering his agenda. He might have noble intentions, but how can I trust him now? Here's what I don't get, says James, sounding confused and frustrated. Getting involved with the coalition and sticking it to the crown, I get why that appeals to Emine. But what exactly do you get out of it? Now it's my turn to take my time weighing my thoughts. A hint of wood smoke cuts through the earthy autumn musk, and I close my eyes. Bitter-sweet nostalgia. Late-night bonfires on Huxley Hill. Another time, another place, another life. My people believe that a lost soul must wander in order to find what they're missing. I don't look at him, keeping my gaze fixed on the gently rippling pond. We call it Soulgrimage, to seek the wisdom of solitude in the hopes that the gods may offer you guidance. Seek your answers in the verdant wilds, listen for the words on the whispering wind. They are the truth of the gods. A few years back there was an outbreak, some sort of illness. It spread like wildfire, and it hit the clan hard. The death toll was brutally steep. I lost people that I love very much, and I was in a dark place for a long time after that. I was broken, and I just couldn't seem to put myself back together. I woke up one morning and I just felt the call of the wild, the need for Soulgrimage. I was just so tired of being lost and wearing a mask to pretend that I wasn't. I left a note, packed my things, and I was on the road before the sun was up. I can't explain it all, but when I returned, the hamlet was gone, desecrated and destroyed. I spent 2 days burying what remained of the dead, and searching through the wreckage, finding nothing but rubble and ash. There were no survivors. After I left, I walked north through the winter, until one day I just sort of stumbled into Emine's life and got swept up in it. There's nothing else, James. She's all I have. This is her world, and it matters to her. So, it matters to me. The kingdom confuses me. I can't wrap my head around the fact that Celeste and Emine were just left to fend for themselves. It breaks my heart. It offends me. I despise the thought of it. They shouldn't have been forced to live on the streets without food or shelter. Celeste shouldn't have been forced to shoulder the responsibility of raising her little sister only to be murdered for doing whatever it took to see that through. They were orphans, starving and homeless whilst others enjoyed lives of luxury, and then they were punished for trying to provide for themselves. The injustice of it makes me sick. If my family were with me now, I'd want the Northern Kingdom to be a better, fairer, safer place for them to live. The truth is, I just need to start again. I need somewhere to call home. Something to believe in, to live for. That's what I get out of it. I offer my sincerest wish that your loved ones find peace and take their place within the choirs of fate, says James, his voice gruff and serious as he gives the bench a respectful rap of his knuckles. I hadn't expected that, and it catches me off guard. After a month or two in the Northern Kingdom, I asked Emine why the gods seemed to be absent in Arcadia. She explained that the crown forbids religious practice under threat of death. They demand the citizens of Arcadia denounce any faith in what they call frivolous deities and recognise the reigning monarch as the great provider. It seems that James is full of surprises. The choirs of fate, I ask, offering him a quizzical frown. It's a Clearwater thing. He shrugs, gesturing over to the twinkling arches. There's this legend about the phoenix and dragon, two divine beings keeping the balance of fate. There's loads of interpretations, but basically, they're bound together for eternity. They're either locked in a perpetual war, or it's a love story. Some people around here call themselves disciples of the eternal confluence. They believe in the great cycle. Life, death, rebirth. In the end, all things burn, but something always rises from the ashes. The choirs of fate sing to the phoenix and dragon as they do the thing, either fighting or dancing, depending on who you ask. Do you believe that? No, but it's a nice story, and it makes people happy. I just think the arches are amazing. The first time I ever saw them was this last summer solstice. They had a fair in the gardens that lasted from dawn till dusk. The arches have been positioned to catch the light of the sun as it rises and falls. I sat where we are now and listened to the local choir sing as the sun went down. The way it lit up the dragon, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The kingdom's so noisy, it can be hard to think sometimes, but these gardens are something else. Something about them gives me this inner peace. It revitalises me, and I come here sometimes when I need to clear the mess in my head. Is that why you were here tonight? To clear your head? Yeah. He gazes at his boots, his jaw tightening. I was trying to work out what to do about Ellen Grimsley. I figured that might be the case. We heard about that. We got a ride into town with a friend from Minton. She's Helen's aunt. You know what, mate? At this point, that doesn't even surprise me. Reaching inside his jacket, he withdraws a small silver key. He's silent for a long moment, frowning down at it as he twists it thoughtfully through his fingers. Then, he rolls his shoulders, heaves a heavy sigh, and tucks it back inside his pocket. Let's go, he says, getting to his feet and gesturing for me to follow as he sets off briskly along the gravel path. "Where are we going?" I ask, falling into step beside him. "You don't have to come." He flashes me a grim smile, but I'm sick of keeping my head down and minding my own business. I'm going to Malford's house. It's time to find out how bent this bastard really is. You could cut the tension with a knife as we make our way swiftly along Big Street, with little alleys and tree-lined side streets snaking away from the main road in every direction. On any other night, I would have called the silence that hangs over the residential neighbourhoods we pass through sleepy, but with the fog pressing in, and only the occasional yellow-tinged glow of a gas lamp to guide us, it feels heavy and imposing. "What we're about to do is as dangerous as it gets," says James, keeping his gaze fixed ahead of him as he leads the way. "I know for a fact the captain took a stagecoach back to Tunstall this morning. He's on his way to Bramsby on official business and he won't be back for at least a week. I also know he recently got his hands on a little townhouse in Prickwell Road. It's his home away from home when he visits Clearwater. I broke into his office this afternoon and nicked the key. We're going in, and if he's got anything to hide, which I believe he has, then we're gonna find it." I throw him a sideways glance, but his face is grave and determined. He's not kidding. How did this night go from me trying to kill some time and clear my head by taking a walk through town to breaking into a property belonging to a high-ranking government official? Honestly, Emine can't leave me alone for 5 minutes. I had my doubts about all of this. I thought that maybe Bossman was just blowing the captain's bad behaviour out of proportion. Maybe it was all just a cock and bull story designed to reel Emine and I in. Nothing more than his attempt at furthering the coalition's agenda. By all accounts, James is a smart, reasonable man. He knows that his life is at stake here, and I don't think this is a decision that he would make lightly. If he's willing to go to such extreme lengths, he clearly has some serious concerns. It certainly doesn't seem that hard for him to believe that Melford killed Helen, and in my opinion that says everything that I need to know about the captain's character. The road curves to the right, sloping gently downwards as we head north towards the riverside strip. On either side of us, rough stone walls and wrought iron gates guard the houses beyond, their ghostly silhouettes looming in the shadows as we pass them. James catches my eye and gestures towards the corner of a nearby street to our right. An ornamental gas lamp, its cage decorated with delicate filigree, hangs over a weathered wooden sign that reads Pemberley Road. We hang back and wait, concealed in the gloom, eyes peeled and ears straining for any sign of approach. There's no hint of the wind, no crunch of leaves underfoot, nothing moves at all. I want you to know that I understand exactly how serious this is, I say quietly, casting James an imploring look. You're the boss. I'll do as I'm told. I won't let you down in there. He shoots me a tight smile and a grateful nod. Right, here's what we're gonna do. At the far end of Pemberley, there's a fence, on the other side of which is the captain's backyard. You're gonna hop over and wait for my signal. Meanwhile, I'll circle round to Prickwell. If anybody spots me, I'll tell them I was running some sort of urgent errand for the captain. I'll enter the property, make sure it's empty, and let you in via the back door. I don't want any hero complex bullshit, and I am deadly serious about that. If we get caught, something kicks off, or goes wrong in any way, then I want you to leave me, get out, and I'll find you later if I can. Understood. I'll be waiting. Alright. Good luck. His eyes sweep the area one last time before offering me a terse nod and walking away, disappearing into the fog without a backwards glance. My heart pounds against my ribcage as I wait, giving him half a minute to put some distance between us. Doubt creeps in. a nervous tension rising. This could go horribly wrong, but I don't believe it will. Sometimes all you have is faith. There's really no point thinking about it. This is what's happening. It's time to get going. It takes me 2.5 minutes to get down Pemberley Road, over the fence and into Melford's overgrown back garden. The house is waiting at the top of a gentle slope. It leers down, dark and foreboding, its pitched roof and tall chimney towering above me. It feels hostile and ominous, like it's staring at me. Gods have mercy, Evander. This is not the time for nerves. I have no idea how long it takes James to ease the door open and give one short, sharp whistle, but it feels like a decade. Making my way across the garden, swift and subtle as a dormouse, I slip inside and close the door behind me with a soft click. It's utterly dark inside. The fragrant, smoky aroma of incense hangs heavy in the air. When my eyes finally adjust to the darkness, I find myself in a long, narrow hallway. There are 4 doors to the left and a staircase to the right. Cobwebs hang from the low, timber-beamed ceiling. The limestone walls are bare and unadorned. The hardwood flooring has seen better days. It's cracked and warped, but Melford's attempted to cover it up with a carpet runner. A swirling pattern of deep crimson and charcoal grey, orange highlights here and there. I actually think it looks pretty good, but now isn't the time to be admiring the captain's taste in decor. "This way," says James, heading for the staircase. "He's got an office in the basement." The bare boards creak and groan beneath my feet, like they're protesting my intrusion and trying to sound the alarm, as I follow James down and through a heavy wooden door. A lantern splutters to life, and the room comes into soft focus. An ostentatious writing desk dominates the room, with a bulky typewriter taking pride of place. Its brightly polished surface is littered with an empty whiskey bottle, a large tumbler, an overflowing ashtray, and an assortment of documents. It might be a cluttered mess, but it must have cost the captain a pretty penny. I bet those silver inlays don't come cheap. The wall behind the desk is taken up by a crisp Arcadian flag, the blue star of the north emblazoned over a forest green background. It glares at me like the watchful eye of the crown, with Melford's high-backed, black leather chair as its pupil. I doubt it was a conscious choice, but the effect is still unsettling. Averting my eyes, I scan the rest of the room. A trio of large filing cabinets, a bookcase, and an ornate grandfather clock line the walls. My gaze is captured by an oil painting hanging on the wall opposite the captain's chair. The canvas is expansive, presenting sweeping views of barren tundras and the harsh beauty of bleak, snow-capped mountains. It's haunting and familiar, like a window to last winter. Focus, Evander. Forcing myself to look away, I push the surge of unwelcome memories to one side for now. James catches my eye as he slides open a drawer to one of the filing cabinets. He glances over at the painting, then back to me with a slight nod of understanding. "I'm sorry, mate. If it helps, believe me, that'll pass with time." James frowns as he thumbs through a pile of documents. Celeste's execution lit a fire in Emine. It filled her up with anger, tempered her, made her hard. Not me, though. It hollowed me out. I couldn't even cry and I hated myself for it. It felt like I was disrespecting her. Like, maybe, I'd never even cared at all. Or at least not enough. Almost a year later, I'm off duty, bored out of my mind. I went to the market and I found this stall, right? a family that whittles little figurines. That's not usually my sort of thing, but smack bang, front and centre, there's this tiny little sparrow. It reminded me of this time Sal nursed one back to health. I can still see the expression on her face when she finally set it free. Bittersweet, heartbroken and overjoyed all at once. That was it. Every emotion I'd been expecting back in the beginning just slammed into me. I bought it, took it home, and it's still there in my kitchen window. That's how my father was after the sickness. I stride over to take the seat behind Melford's desk. I don't believe that he ever properly grieved. He couldn't break. He had people that he needed to be strong for, just as you did. I'm sure you believed, and rightly so, that Celeste would have wanted you to look after Emine, which you did, and I thank you for that, because you helped her through her darkest times, and now she is helping me through mine. James shoots me a grateful smile before picking out another folder, rifling through it with a look of deep concentration. Refocusing, I begin my inspection of the desk. We work in silence for a few minutes, each of us combing methodically through what we find, which isn't much in my case, mostly odds and ends. How's it going over there? Nothing special. It looks like it's mostly just random crap he shoved away quickly. No luck over here either. James drops a folder back into one of the filing cabinets with a clang and snaps it shut. It's all official documentation. Budget reports, progress updates, personnel files. Are you tempted to take a peek at your own? I know I would be. I don't think I could resist. I bend down to open a door and find a well-stocked liquor cabinet. It seems the captain likes a drink. After inspecting a vintage bottle of brandy, I set it down on the desk. James opens his mouth to answer me, but I raise a finger to stop him. Pressing my ear to the desk, I give it 3 hard knocks before double-checking to make sure. My suspicions confirmed, I begin emptying the cabinet. James watches with interest as I extract the bottles one by one, placing them carefully upon the captain's desk. Once it's completely empty, I get stuck in, and it takes me less than 30 seconds to find the telltale catch. It's subtle, but luckily I know what I'm looking for, and once I've released it, the top of the cabinet slides away to reveal a hidden compartment, just as I thought. Now we're on to something. My pulse quickens as I reach inside, and when my fingers brush against something soft, a triumphant smile spreads across my face. Well, well, what do we have here? I climb to my feet, holding out a thick, leather-bound ledger. It seems the captain is eager to keep this hidden. Shall we take a peek? James takes it with a nod of thanks and a curious frown. Nice one. What gave you that idea? My best friend was a carpenter and he included a secret compartment in everything he built, just to see if people would find them. Nobody ever did. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only person who was in on the joke. I watch as James flips through the ledger with a rapidly deepening scowl. Whatever it contains, he doesn't seem to like it very much, and I must admit that makes me slightly nervous. I've got a nasty feeling about this, he says, his tone laced with disgust and dread. It's all in code, and I'm pretty sure I could probably decipher it, but I need some time. I'm going to have to take it with me. If there's anything else, we need to find it and get out, because I can only understand a bit, but from what I've seen, Melford's into some pretty serious shit. Okay. He's obviously not stupid enough to leave anything out in the open. I assume you've been here before, so where else could he stash the stuff he really doesn't want to be found? Tucking the ledger inside his jacket, James casts his gaze around the room, tapping his foot as he thinks. Finally, after almost a minute and a half, He shoots me a grin and marches over to the grandfather clock. "Let's be having you," he says, heaving the clock away from the wall. "I reckon there'll be something behind here. It's totally off-centre. Looks to me like he pulled it out but didn't push it back all the way." He takes his time, inspecting every inch of the clock from top to bottom. I see the disappointed slump in his shoulders momentarily, but then something catches his eye. "I'm pretty sure I can see loose bricks over here." He crouches down to take a closer look. "Oh yeah, definitely." Joining him in the corner of the room, I watch as he wiggles the 2 corner bricks free to reveal a crevice in the base of the wall. James lies on his stomach and reaches inside, briefly fumbling around before pulling something out with a grunt of satisfaction. Getting to his feet, he shows me a large drawstring pouch. After inspecting its contents, James looks as if he's seen a ghost. He's wide-eyed, white as a sheet, and there's a slight tremor in his hands, which is unsettling, because I can't tell whether that's due to anger or fear. It joins the ledger in his pocket, and then he turns to me with undisguised dread in his eyes. Brilliant. This is going to be bad news, isn't it? This is so much worse than I expected. He rubs his gloved hands together nervously. "I know you're curious, but trust me, I don't have time to explain right now. We seriously need to get out of here. I want this place looking like no one was ever here, and then I want to be over that back fence in 5 minutes. I dread to think what we stumbled across. It clearly has him rattled, and I get the impression that's not easy to do." Without another word, we start packing everything away as fast as possible, swift and efficient, returning all but the ledger and the pouch to its rightful place. By the time we're done, the basement is pristine. James kills the lantern, plunging us back into total darkness, and we leave. The cold air hits me like a slap as I slip out through the back door, James following and locking it behind him. The tension is unbearable as we make our way across the captain's backyard, clamber over the fence, and stride briskly along Pemberley Road. We're both on high alert, ears straining. I keep expecting some sort of alarm or a hand on my shoulder, but there's no sight, nor sound of pursuit. Somehow, by the grace of the gods, we seem to have gotten away with it. Even so, we can't be too careful, and it isn't until we rejoin Big Street that we finally slow down and settle into a steady pace. James heaves a heavy sigh of relief and visibly relaxes. Right then, I glance over at James. It seems that's the hard part over and done with. So, what's next, boss? Lady and Emine need to see what we've found. The 4 of us need to talk, and we got a lot of ground to cover. Simple enough. To be honest, I really can't believe you didn't see this coming. Emine's already at the party. Of course she is, because where else would she be? You're right. I should have seen that coming.